Jules, did you make contact?
No.
Oh, okay. Right, I will just... All right. Well, many familiar faces here today, so hello and welcome. I guess the weather has proven to be a problem in terms of some of the luminaries we were expecting to have participate in this session.
It says your microphone is muted. I don't know whether that's on there or...
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
So today's agenda is basically split into two, in the sense that we're going to be talking about data governance and then AI governance. And the two are like, in this day and age, two sides of the same coin. So James has kindly decided to talk to us about the right to be forgotten and the complexities that there are in and around that, which is one of those gnarly problems that you get once you've had a large language model learn stuff about people. And then Alex, Christian von Hansen, will be speaking to us about AI governance and risk and sprawl and things like ISO standards and the voluntary guardrails. And I believe that he might have a surprise demonstration for us.
Yes.
And last up, we have Tamil, who is standing in for Nigel, whose flight got cancelled because of the weather, who will be talking to us a little bit about how Deep Weaver have a number of solutions around AI governance to help clients manage and navigate this new world order that we are currently in. And last up, we've got a quick panel discussion where you can ask our questions. So Nigel is down the back there with hair now, so that's Tamil instead of... but Julien will be leading the panel discussion. I imagine most of you know Julien as well. I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about the community that we've been growing over the last couple of years. We're very close to having 500 members, and it is doubling every 6 months. It's the Data Innovators Exchange, and it's really driven by the fact that there is this exponential growth in data. You know, it is growing 50% year on year. There are more than 2,000 vendors listed in the machine learning, data and analytics, or AI and data landscape. And we estimate that there's in excess of 3.5 million professionals in this space. So networking, especially at a time where there is rapid change and adoption of these technologies, becomes a pretty important imperative from a professional development standpoint. So we have a number of things that we do for the community. There's a newsletter, a radio show, there's a community hub, where there are also classrooms and masterclasses hosted. And we also run these meetups. So we have a number of sponsors. One of the biggest being Tech Data, and Deep Weaver have kindly sponsored today's event with IBM. So yes, 492 members, as I mentioned. And we actually are now publishing content on the radio show through YouTube, 2 episodes a week. So this is growing steadily. We also have a number of resources on there. So Watson X in particular, Shung from Tech Data, put a lot of effort into creating webinar content and guides on how to access how to utilize Watson X in various situations on the community hub. So there's more than 10 classrooms on there and a whole resource set. There are regular online meetups. And in fact, if you're getting Data Vault certified, We actually use the classroom on there to help facilitate your journey through the wiles of becoming a certified Data Vault professional. The other thing that some would say is a little bit quirky, but hopefully is interesting to our audience, and we believe so based on the engagement rates that we get. We're typically averaging about 50% open rates on our weekly newsletter, which, if any of you know anything about newsletters, you can expect maybe 30% open rates. So, pardon me, this is one of the ways in which we're actually testing topics that are resonant to a global audience. If you're not signed up to it, I would encourage you to sign up to the newsletter. So, with no further ado, we have Mr. Hartwright, and he is going to talk to us and not be forgotten.
Yes.
I'm going to just steal my coffee.
Thanks, Sam. So, yes, the right to be forgotten. Can you hear that?
Yeah. All right, Beatrice. There was no alien. Flash of light you saw in the sky was not a UFO. Swamp gas from a weather balloon was trapped in a thermal pocket and refracted the light from Venus.
Well, wait a minute. So you just flash that thing, it erases our memory, and you just make up a new one?
Standard issue biology.
So that's how Men in Black execute on right to be forgotten. But what actually is it? It emerged from the EU GDPR, and it's that individuals can say, hey, the information, the personal data that you got on me, I want you to erase that from your organization and forget me, and I expect it to be done within 30 days unless you tell me that it can't. And as an organization, you have to apply that. You have to, or you have to have a valid business reason, a valid reason under law and finance, etc., to retain that information. So that comes back to when somebody signs up, you've also got to have on your privacy policy, this is what I'm going to capture and this is what I'm holding it for. So you've got the both ways. You've got to respect what you said when they gave you your data, and you've got to go, hey, yeah, we finished. You downloaded the case study. That was it. We're done. I now need to delete that. That right to be forgotten is already in a number of countries. So European GDPR was the first. The UK just copied and pasted it when they did Brexit, but it's coming in various countries. So and US states. So California, Virginia, Ohio, etc., are doing it. But it's being strongly considered in Australia that there's very definite movement in Australia. And in fact, the APP 11 of the 13 Australian privacy principles, as I say, it should only be retained for as long as you've got a valid business process to do so. And how many of us keep it for longer? Almost all of us. So what is actually deemed personal data? So data about an identified individual, or with a combination of information you are likely to be able to identify them. So that's the name, address, phone number, email, those sorts of things. Passport numbers, driver's license, etc. But also anything that's like a customer ID that I use across all of my systems to link you internally. That's deemed personal information, partly because it can connect to information like the name and the address that then identifies you. And getting deeper in the photographs, your voice printer, the things we don't want to lose now because AI deepfakes are going to get us. And in some cases, employee record information. So if you're in the public sector, employees are treated as individuals. And so that you have to look after that just as well. If you're in the private sector, you don't need to care so much. But it's also into sensitive data. So sexual orientation, racial, ethnic, committees, etc., that you might be part of. That can all be deemed something that could be and has historically been used and abused against people. And And as we go on through, you know, that smartwatch information in all of the fitness data. We've seen a couple of instances around where that seems to have been misused. Where you're doing it, you're going, hey, I'm getting some great things out of that, but that's now actually sensitive data. Because if you're like me and I'm sitting in my office 9 to 5 every day now and not moving anywhere apart from getting coffee up and downstairs, then that could be used against me in health. But it also extends to anything that we've got digitally, any digital or digitized data. So if I've got a PDF form or something that somebody did in store, that actually both the physical paper and any digitization is also deemed personal data if it's got that sort of information on. So you've got it in a filing system, you've got it in a store. If it's easily accessible, if it's alphabetized, etc., then that's deemed, if you can find it with ease, that's deemed personal data. If it's in a big box and just says, you know, 2003, you could probably get away with it. But if it's accessible, then it's deemed personal data and you have to look after it. So why now? Why are we talking about right to be forgotten now? A lot of it is off the back of breaches. So every week there seems to be another one, and you know, the big ones, the Optus, the Medibank, Qantas, if you can think back to it. There's our personal data that we were going, hey, organization, I've given it to you, you said you were going to look after it, and then suddenly it gets breached out. And of course, all of that extra data that we're providing, as I say, the smartwatch data that I might feed in to an app, well, that's going wider and broader. And as we're providing more of that information, that information is also going over to third parties. I was doing a cookie workshop earlier this week where, you know, when you go onto a website and here's the URL that I'm doing, that's going off to Google and Meta and Vimeo and YouTube and etc. And it's like, oh, well, in that URL, if I've gone, irritable bowel, all of that text goes through to Google. And so now they're profiling you on that data. And it's like, this is what we're releasing out there. And yeah, in Australia and UK have just released it, you know, looking after our children's data and definitely keeping that secure and secret, and certainly restricting all of those marketing people using it and hitting them and getting them to steal the credit card and buy lots of Minecraft stuff. And then the final one, the EU AI Act, and the minor part that we've in Australia taken that to go, there's all of this data going in and you're making automated decisions, and I don't know, it's this black box computer says no thing. Well, I want a level of understanding of what you're doing with my data so that, again, you're not taking, there's no bias in there, etc., or there's little as that. So all of that strikes up, and the OAIC, the government organization that looks across information privacy, they're going, yeah, come on guys, come on businesses, you've got to do better. So 1 in 3 complaints are about data security to the OAIC. The OAIC last year put forward 380 proposals, 380 areas of improvement of changes to privacy law in Australia. Partly around the change of government, that got chopped and chopped and chopped back, and I think 20 of them went through, but all the rest is still sitting there going, hey, now we're past the change of government, we're going to push in. And the right to be forgotten is one of those. And in their focus areas for the next 12 months, that was late last month, there were a few things in there. So they're going to look at the credit reporting process. They're going to look at data brokerage. So all of those places and clean rooms, for example, of, hey, I'm throwing in to try and match and enrich, and then go, hey, I can go off and market off that. And then everything in the application of artificial intelligence. So moving to that thing the same as the EU AI Act and saying that you need to explain what you're doing in there, and I need the option to have a human review that data and make a decision if it's against me. This big nasty one, excessive collection and excessive retention information. That's the big one that's tying back to our right to be forgotten, is organizations. Yeah, of course we want more from the consumers, and because we know we're going to get a better picture and we can interact better with them. But again, it's like, are you straying over the line in terms of getting data? I worked for News Corp a few years ago. If there was an acquisitive organization, they were them. And we had things like, well, so you want to read 15 articles. Okay, pass me your name, your email address. That's cool. Can I have your home address? Getting a bit, your income, your age. How many children do you have? Drop down. Okay, for each of those children, what's their dates of birth? and so there's just the thing is like, I just want to read 5 articles a week for free. But the secondary part there is that, well, you haven't reached in. Like when we've been together for 6 months, maybe some information about my children would be appropriate. But that's, that excessive collection, we're saying, but marketing could do some great things with that, do them a great offer, find an ad place that they could go that really fits. But you've got to work in that relationship. And I think a lot of people have moved past that boundary in, well, I'm doing it to what I think is for good use, but it is increasing that footprint of data around individuals. And I don't think we've got any government people here, but Freedom of Information Act, access to personal data, there's been lots of failures in just not doing it, just not acting upon it, and not being able to provide the level of information that people go, I know you've got that on me. And it's like, where is it? Why have you not presented it back to me? And so why it matters, why are we into the right to be forgotten? So I'll come back. So the yellows are breachy and the blues are right to erasure. But all of that data we're collecting and holding and then goes breach, the average cost to an organization off the back of a breach of just looking after that and battening the hatches down is $4 million. And then the secondary part of that is, well, if you've had a breach and you've had to report it, there's churn. So people are going, they've lost my information. Okay, well, I don't want to work with them anymore. I'll go off and do something else. So churn. There's a tertiary part there is that the AIC will come in, and they did it to Oxfam this year. Oh, like, no, I'm going to oversee you and make sure that you're doing it right. And nobody wants people looking over their shoulder whilst they're doing work, do they? And then in the right to erasure, so this was near when the GDPR came out, but Austrian Post, $9.5 million for not acting on erasure requests. Saying, yeah, I've done it, don't worry, you're all good, and then actually not doing it. And a real estate company, they'd kept lots and lots of tenant data for longer than they needed to. So lots of reasons why we need to take it. But it's, as I said, that thing around collecting, retaining data, using it, I believe it's a trust thing. So if you can go, I take privacy, I take taking in your personal data seriously and looking after it, and removing it when I don't need it anymore, it actually gives me 2 values. It's like, if, God forbid, I did get a breach, well, there's fewer blocks of data then there for somebody else to hit. And that email that I sent to 3 million individuals who went, well, yeah, 10 years ago I worked with you. It's like, why on earth have you got that? So you've got a great piece. And that bit around thinking about it and minimizing where you're holding it, it means when you have to act upon the right to be forgotten piece, you've got fewer areas where you need to go and look and hit and change. And so there's a piece in there, there's a privacy by design, which you're going to talk about in a second, which is starting in with your organization and putting privacy by design in, starts doing those things, minimizing the amount of data, the personal data that you're holding, and segregating it, putting it away where it's much, much harder for somebody to go and get it. And it's only going to get worse.
You're going to forget everything you know about Nitwit. No, dragonfly. Dragonfly, yes. See. Eventually. What? Eventually. At the end. No, forget it now.
So yes, forget it now. Don't sit around waiting. So doing it now, a stage process. So just go out, start, and I've got some further slides. So go out and find where might personal data be across all of my systems. And then once I've got that, link that into my DSAR, Data Subject Access Request, which is already part of Australian law. So if somebody says, I want you to provide the personal information on me, you have to do that. So align that. And then look at the right to be forgotten methods that you might need to apply. We've got a bit on that. And then build it, and then run it. And then add change management and we don't stay static. We'll bring in new data, we'll bring in new systems. So you've got to make sure that when you bring in a new system, you've got to think the right to be forgotten processes that I should implement on those. And one other important thing, maintain the records. So when you've had a data subject access request, when you've had a right to be forgotten request, you need to maintain records and make sure that you go through that process in a reasonable amount of time. And yes, my other one, roll out privacy by design. So next few slides are all about that. So where and how to look for personal data. So in all of the plethora of places. So you'll have it in all of your operational systems, CRM, the marketing, your customer data platform, finance systems, but also in that stuff that we'd possibly historically not thought about. All of the chat logs, all of the online chat systems, there's going to be nubbits of personal information sat in there. All the stuff, if you've had warehouses, lake houses, that's going to be thread all the way through that process. If you've built a single customer view, you're going to have some master data management process there that's got all of those little facets of individuals rolling up and multiple sources there. So, and then removing those. And then if you've moved out into graph databases, so looking at counterparty risk or relationships, you'll have it all in there. And then the ones that nobody ever wants to touch, stuff that's in SharePoint or Google Drive, stuff that's in Outlook and Teams and Slack and etc. It's like there's lots of threads everywhere, and any scanned documents, scanned forms that you've got sat in there. All of those have to be considered in this thing around access to personal data and right to be forgotten. There are some tools out there already. So Microsoft Purview, if you're a Microsoft shop, there's e-discovery stuff in there that will start searching around, going, how big is this problem that I've got? IBM Guardian has similar pieces. Other ones, OneTrust, who do cookie compliance as well, et cetera, et cetera. But there are tools out there that can help us go and scan, search, and go, oh yeah, there's some over there, to give you the size of the prize. I don't know if size of the prize is the right thing, but it gives you some estimation of how big and nasty it's going to be. And yeah, start on it now. So this is the privacy by design piece. So that starting piece of why we're collecting this data. Are I actually doing something valuable with it? Could I sort of gather slightly less in this sort of firm? Do I really need date of birth? Or would age range be enough for me to do things, to still do valid and useful things? And an age range isn't deemed personal data because I couldn't identify the one person in there. Getting rid of that data when you're done with it. So set up retention policies. So after it's been in the CRM for 2 years and they've not interacted with me, just delete it. Yeah. And if I've got, here's a bit of data, but in the warehouse I've joined it all together, that might actually be able to re-identify. So consider some of those pieces. That's a real deep, dark, dirty area that we won't do much on, but yeah, you need to think about it. And then this thing, privacy enhancing technology. So when I'm pulling in personal data, put it off to one side, secure it, etc., and make sure that, hey, there's very few people in the marketing department actually need to see names and addresses. They might on the final thing of checking it out, but your data scientists, why do they need to see personal data? Again, move it off to one side. And I do work with Tourism Tasmania. We had a system where we invite journalists and trade in, and they do what they call a FMILS program. So we go, right, we're going to do 5 days, and we're going to go here and stay here, and you'll see this amazing thing, get some great photos. But to do that, to book that whole trip, we need your passport number, and we need your date of birth, and we need your full name. So what we did in the design of that, we actually put a completely separate table. And we said, that's going to be stored in there for the period where we're doing the booking. And as soon as that trip is over, we're going to delete it because we have no, but we're keeping all of the other data. So all of the things that they went on the trip, etc. This journalist went on the trip, we keep. So this is privacy by design. Other bits and pieces we can do is tokenization or one-way hashing. So I put that personal data in and I create a random key, nothing that's off that data. And then I carry the key around and just keep that personal information in one corner. So I could potentially do something with it. But if I delete the origin of that key, I can never re-identify that person from that information alone. As I said earlier, derivation. So, just broaden it out. It's like make it less identifiable, even if you do cross things over. And then in the consumption side, so if you're pushing this out, for example, for research, possibly for the data scientists, if you're putting it out there, there are tools now where you can add noise to that data and basically de-identify it from, or I could pin down, I found Steve. Yeah, I found Steve because I know where he lives and various things. And k-anonymity. So when you're putting data up, applying it, so if I apply that filter and that filter and that filter, I could get down to unique individual. That's re-identification. So k-anonymity goes, no, I want no group smaller than 5 or 10 or 20. And that's one of the things, like in the census information, that's the sort of thing that they apply there. No group smaller than 25, even if you'd put all of the filters on. I'm not going to talk homomorphic encryption. I still don't understand it, but it's there. And then there is, as we're working through this data, well, we want to have training systems, and those training systems, we want to have something that looks like real data. And any of those data science or any of us doing development in the data lakes, we want something that feels like real data and the data that we're going to get from the systems. So synthesizing that data, generating from that stuff, creating something that looks like and has integrity across it, but isn't real data. And that's, again, privacy enhancing stuff. And again, secure. I don't think we've got any of these. It's basically, here is a bit of hardware that is properly keeping this in a completely separate area and nobody can touch it and da-da. But they were expensive. So implementing it, talk through a bit. So I'll pull out here that thing I said earlier. So if I've got somebody just come in and put an order in and bought an item, and they then come in a month later and say, no, forget me, you probably have a valid reason not to delete that personal information, because you go, well, what happens if we have a recall? I feel that I've got a valid reason to keep that because I need to communicate on a recall. Or it's less than a year. You come in and you say, it's broken. And I go, well, I didn't sell it to you. All of those sorts of things can start being valid reasons for you to retain it. And in the financial services, it's retaining it for 7 years. In telco, we have the metadata law, which says I've got a record of all the phone calls, all the texts, the metadata around it, but that needs to be retained because, if you're a bad actor, we need to be able to come back and do that. But otherwise, you need to go into your CRMs, your marketings, and you need to delete. You need to delete that parent record and delete all the children records. And you can start going, oh, that's going to be quite nasty because and especially over here. Well, if I was reporting on that, hey, we made $1 million in sales last month, and then suddenly it's 990,000. So that thing around segregation becomes a really important thing. Move that personal data off to one side, keep the master record so that all of the, hey, here are orders and here are all, you can keep them. And do that in your operational system, do that through all the others. And the other there, as I say, in that minimization, why am I keeping 3, 5, 10 years of stuff in the CRM? Well, Salesforce like you to do that because they can charge you more. But let's actually do that. We still can have it in the warehouse, but let's clear down the operational system. So if somebody hacks into the operational system, they're going to get less data. It's still nasty that they get some, but they're going to get less. But also remember to cascade that down to link system backups, et cetera, et cetera. Don't just go, hey, because I delete it from here, it will delete it from any other things. as I said earlier, I've never done it. But if you're in like all of the Outlook, all the things, and just going, hey, there's a name in 17 emails, and it's like deleting those 17 emails, and it's there are tools coming through, but it's still a really nasty thing to go, well, is that really personal data? Is an email on itself something that's really personal data? And you'll usually say yes, but do you have a reasonable denial reason for that? We'll work on through that. HR systems, very definitely. So HR systems, if you've just done an application and you never got the job, then it should be deleted. If you've gone through and you've been an employee, then there's a valid reason to keep it. Just like the Outlook, content management systems, all the stuff that we've got in SharePoint, et cetera, finding it and deleting it. There's all sorts of potentially nasty bits and pieces that we got in there, but you need to run through it and go, have we got a reasonable deniability on this of not doing it? Otherwise, you have to make it part of your process. And the paper archives, same thing. If they are just boxes in the corner and they've gone off to Iron Mountain, then you probably don't need to worry. But if you've got them accessible in a filing cabinet, they're still deemed and you still need to go rip it up or go, no, we kept it because there was a reason to keep it. As I said, the master data management, your single customer view, your customer data platforms, actually it's a good source to go and find it. So when you're doing the data subject access request, if you get your single customer view, probably all those source systems that fed that, that's a good thing of going, oh yeah, I need to look in there and there and there. But you still need to delete it. And you need to make sure that that ripples through all the processes. Because if you've got a golden record that's made up of 3 systems, if that golden record's still sitting there with the best set of personal data, it's still personal data. And as I say, in the risk, in the finance data, you've probably got a valid reason for keeping that for the 7 years, even across household views. So that, the household risk, etc. Warehouses, if anybody's built a strong data warehouse, you've got a history record of every change. And so now you don't just go, hey, create a new record that doesn't have that information in it or it's masked. You've got to go through every one of those and obfuscate it or delete it. And so, as I said earlier, the deletes, they can impact your dashboards, they can impact machine learning and any sort of forecasting you've done. It would have to be a large number to skew your machine learning. But there's also a thing there in like, well, aren't they interesting? If they've come in and asked for a right to be forgotten, there must be something they've done wrong in the main. There'll be some nasty people out there who are just doing it, but that sort of skew. So other information still not back to the unique individual, but where there's some campaigns that we did that maybe stretch the boundaries into creepy territory, and go and look at that and utilize that sort of information. Denial's not normally an option unless it's back to this risk finance data. Is you pretty much have to delete it or fully anonymize it. And then partners. So all of those people that hey, I'm using your SaaS platform, some of that personal data is going in, but you're looking after it. Or, oh, you're doing my loyalty program. You've got to make sure that they also delete it. They don't just go, yeah, got it, mate, all good. But then they don't delete it. And that bit, maintaining the records. So the first bit, still also under your data subject access request, is you've got to go through the appropriate processes to verify they are who they say you are before you furnish them with personal data of somebody else. But you've got to go through that process. You've got usually 30 days unless you say, hey, I've got through and I've found there's lots of information and we might need to redact some. You've got 30 days to do it. So get it, record all those interactions, run your process. You've got to present that information back in a readable form in the DSAR. But you've also got to do things like, hey, here is a segment or a profile or something that I gave to you. I've got to give you understandable information on the back of that. And the AI Act's probably going to make that bigger and nastier in what we do. So we've gone through this right to be forgotten process. I put James Hartwright, I've emailed him back, hey, here's the information, and it's in a nicely password protected. But now I've got a record of James Hartwright, his email address, in my right to be forgotten system. But you're supposed to have forgotten. An immediate forget is not appropriate because there still might be some backs and forths. But after, let's say, 30 days, do the final delete of that the personal information in that right to be forgotten. You still need to register that that you did some pieces, but you do need to remove that personal information too. And then the brave new world. So we said the chats, etc. So there's all sorts of stuff. Now we're moving into AI. That here's a call log. Hello, Mr. Smith. I'm Alice. Can you add my daughter Mary? Here's her phone number. And that's now we're throwing that into vector databases, into LLMs, and etc. So we've got to do something to stop that, because once it's sat in the LLM and running it, like deleting that is almost impossible. RAG's a little bit easier, but it'd be better not to throw it in there if we can. So one option, just strip it out. But then it starts becoming less understandable to the LLM. Yeah, you can't really work that out. The second one is some base masking. Hello, name, I'm name, can you add my names? It's mobile and name. So it's getting slightly better because you can say what it is, but it's not, you don't know that there's the agent, the customer, and a third party. So a much better way is masking with something. Hello, the name of the caller, I'm name of the agent. Can you add my relation child, third party, and her name? This is now, so that's obviously, we don't want that one, but this is eminently possible through various tools out there. We can use some of the LLM natural language processing to do this now quite easily. I've got a little ChatGPT script if anyone who wants to borrow it. But we can do all those sort of things. So stop that going in, but keeping the context of what it is so that those LLMs, any of the queries, any of the searches are actually going to return something that's still valid, contextual, and looking at sentiment, etc.
I know nothing. I know nothing. I forget everything. I don't know.
And hopefully that's where we will be by the end. I've been call for time, and just a couple of things. Is like so looking at where else it's gone on. It's really hard to find the volumes of right to be forgotten, because as I say, if you got lots of requests for right to be forgotten, you're probably doing some things wrong. But what we can get is some bits and pieces in terms of the volumes of the DSARs, and some, hey, if you're going to run a manual right to be forgotten, it's going to be about $2,500 per request. And then if you look at that, so based on Sweden and France, 6 to 7 right to be forgotten requests per 10,000 people. So if you're an organization with about 50,000 customers, you can't see that, but it's 25 requests. But 25 requests at $2.5 grand a go per annum starts adding up. And if you're up in here, lucky you. But like in the mid-tier space, it's going to cost you $500,000 per annum to do these right to be forgottens. If we apply our privacy by design, our privacy and minimization, etc., it's going to cost you money to put it in, but it means that I don't need to cascade it through my warehouse, all of those things. I don't need to do it here. I don't need to do it there. So there are ways that we can do this in a sensible way, where spending some money now, spending some money as we're bringing new systems, changing the systems, is going to make this number a lot lower. And can we do good enough? Like everything, nobody's got an unlimited budget to do this, but it's like in the vast majority of cases, if the OAIC does get in, if you do have a breach, or if you do something in here, if you've got a process that you've been following but you missed something, they will look upon that way, way, way more favorably than if you had nothing. So put the things in that start making sense. Pick off the low-hanging fruit and run those through. You'll probably still get into trouble, but it'll be minor. It'll be less. They won't go, I'm going to do oversight. They'll go, just go off and fix those. Tell me where you've done it, and then we're good. And add it in for new projects. So any new project, any new system you put in, do the personal information check. Hey, are we bringing in new personal information here? Are we looking after it correctly? Do we have a retention process? So yeah, that. Document the systems, go and look at your DSAR process, work out what you need to do in right to be forgotten, implement it, put in that change management process, maintain your records, and roll out privacy by design. That's me.
Great.
Cool.
So we'll take a short break now, five minutes, just to go to the bathroom, grab a cup of coffee or tea or refreshment, or have another snack. Tea and coffee is out in the foyer there. So we'll kick off again in about 6 minutes. Thank you. It's just a pity the sound. Yeah, we haven't had the limitation before.
No.
Could you grab some photos?
Oh, yeah.
We have to do it for compliance.
Too easy.
My phone is otherwise occupied. Just to match
There
that. Perfect.
Yeah, that in the background, where it's going. I'll do some others as well.
Nice.
We do have our resident photographer here, though.
Oh, that's why he was looking jealously at the.
Yeah, someone else gets to take photos. Remember we used to do like team events? You'd do like 400 photos. Yeah. Create an online photo. Those are the days. Good times. Well done. Thank you. Yeah, that's good. Oh, you know about it, yeah.
One thing that I wonder is like,
Just need to make sure it's on.
okay. That's in there.
Actually, need to take that one.
Check this one. Okay. Am I live?
Yes. So done. Don't go to the bathroom. But it is technically being live streamed. So yes, it will be cut up later. So,
You should already be
But what I wonder is, you know how Google has like the sign-in options, where you can just sign in with Google. The big companies already have so much data on everyone, and they kind of control the third parties as well. Because when I sign in with Google, Google has my info, so does the third party. And Google can probably change. It shares it with the third party. I think the third party doesn't store it. So that becomes like, when these giants get that big, who's gonna take care of that? You know, there's so much government you can do.
But how can you even find a platform that's going to be able to reach out to all of those different mediums and identify, not only identify the data being there, be able to take action on it, and then report that that's been done? Like, with all these right to be forgotten, I mean, who's coming back? How are you going to prove that you've done it? It's like weird. So Guardian's good at that. Guardian's very good at that. We have another product called Data Lineage. So there's ways to do it, but yeah.
What are you presenting?
AI governance.
What part within that? Like, I'm just talking about.
Talking about some of the regulations around it, what those regulations are, and making it a bit more unique to Australia as well. We have our voluntary standards.
Like ISOs.
Yeah, there's ISOs, the EU AI Act, there's GDPR, there's voluntary standards and all that kind of stuff. But how do they get formed?
Yeah.
You know, who do we turn to when we need help in describing? Okay, what are the controls what should they be? What are the risks? How do we actually identify these root principles to build these guardrails or these ISOs around them? And one of the key things that they look at is IBM's AI Risk Atlas, something we developed. There's another thing called OWASP. OWASP are a cybersecurity consultancy company, and they also develop these kinds of like top 10 risks of LLMs, and these regulators look to them to decide how to do and what to do. And it's not just for industry. It's not just governments that are looking at them. It's also industry. So IBM's recently published something, and I'll show the article about Watson, Chief AI Officer. It's a new role. We didn't have that role. Chief AI Officer, another C-suite, an exec C-suite role, which is brand new.
What's Nicholas then?
Nick Flood? Oh, Nick Renaud. Oh, he's not a CAIO, a Chow. Chow.
Wait, so he is the CAI?
No, he's actually from the product team. He's from What's Next.ai, and he's like an ambassador but he's actually on the product team.
Right.
Yeah, that's his role.
But he's the kind of guy that would probably be the CAI.
Well, a Chow would be.
You're feeling real cheeky saying that.
A Chow would be more like an Angelica Vanessa kind of thing, where they have immense industry experience and own the ethical principles that the company abides by, whether it be regulatory or internal or however you decide to design that. They are the owners of that mission. And
I agree. Someone who's been in the game a long time, right?
But which is, hasn't even been around for that long, but
That's
at least.
what I was gonna say. It has been, because I was looking into it. Even AI has been around for a lot longer than people think it has, in the same form as well. Because I was listening to this little interview the Cursor guy did, Michael.
Oh yeah.
He did an interview on that. They were working on AI in different forms for years, almost a decade before. Experimenting, and so was Sam Altman. He was working on AI for different use cases.
Right.
It wasn't as revolutionary as ChatGPT.
Right.
But they've been doing it for years.
Yeah.
And now everyone sees it as like shit, regular. Back then.
100%. And right now, there's so many organizations that are going through and thinking, regulations are coming, but we don't have to worry about them now. We'll just kind of do what we want. And it's like all that effort's going to be for naught if you're not following some sort of regime today, because you're going to have to go back and re-architect everything. And even then, how are you going to know what to re-architect and where in your environment these AI applications are existing?
Yeah.
It'll be a big back step. Say again?
You ready to go?
Yeah, somewhat. It should be pretty straightforward. Just going to talk about we were just going through it now. Some of those ethical guardrails and principles, and the EU AI Act and the ISOs and the voluntary standards. All of these are formed from the industry, right? These regulators don't just come up with it and go, "Yes, I know everything about AI." They're closely watching what's happening in enterprise and the likes of IBM and independent consulting agents like a company called OWASP, and IBM themselves as well. And we publish things like the AI Risk Atlas. So they read through these things and hey, now we understand the risk landscape. Now we understand the enterprise landscape and the industry landscape. We've identified what these use cases are, where they're being used, how much they're being used. Now we have an idea. Okay, let's write some principle guardrails. Let's write some principle ISOs and things like this. So trying to demystify, where these guardrails are coming from, I think is a great place to start. And then I think as well, talking about, there's some stats out there. 88% of all POCs for AI never make it into production. And just as an open question, obviously it's going to be very directive because I'm going to talk about governance. But it'd be interesting to hear from the room, why? Yeah.
there's more pilots going on than there is operations, you know?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So,
Does Ignition focus on more the consultancy side of AI governance, or do you also have like your own sort of solutions that you offer?
I'll be right back.
Consulting. So there's two parts. Consulting, which and products of the governance, which is more about trying to speed up your delivery process. It's a very well-formed components for the casual data warehouse. So, yeah, but we've got a team here locally, and then supplemented by yeah.
Is that where it started?
No, it started here. So, yeah, team over there. Julien heads it up now, and it's sort of spun off from this other company called Service. I'm not sure of all the lineage of that. It's about 3 weeks in, so I'm on the fly. Yeah, it's a lot of good stuff. Kicked off on this morning at Central Queensland University, where we're going to get data out of this one system and
Correct. And it's a different
it's massive. I mean, the industry is huge for you guys now. Because everyone wants to, has to, but doesn't know how.
and if you get it wrong, the bed's really expensive. It's back in
But do you feel like there's a part of the market that you have to sell to?
Oh, okay.
This is Alan. So if you're talking, you're on the live stream.
part of the issue here.
Yeah, I'll be using mine.
All right, we'll make a start, everybody.
Yeah.
Much appreciated.
I usually put in something a slightly wrong age.
Thank you.
Oh my mate. 2 months ago. Why?
So next up is Alex from IBM, and he's going to be sharing his cheers since we are in the building.
Okay. Really appreciate the previous speech. It was super interesting to hear that problem, right? Like being able to delete information across an entire stack. There's so many automations that have been put in place, so many different products that are pulling from data sets that are across the entire environment, having no visibility. Has anyone ever tried uninstalling Python from their device? Like, I feel like there's a huge similarity because, yeah. So I wanted to talk a little bit about AI governance today. And it's more than just some of those, ISOs and guardrails and things that you've heard about. I wanted to talk about some of the core principles that make up these guardrails. So just give me 1 sec while I just share my screen.
Oh. That's because it's me that's screen sharing.
Ah, I see.
You can overrun it.
Let me give it a go. Okay. Just to start off, I wanted to understand from the room, obviously this is going to be very pointed because I'm going to be talking about AI governance in a minute, but I just want to understand from some of you guys in the audience, why do you think this statistic is happening? So 88% of AI pilots are failing to reach production. And it's not all IT related. Yes.
People and culture.
People and culture. Right, so some people might not perceive it as a safe practice, or they might see an ethical principle along the development of this, and they see the impact, not know how to respond to it, and then might want to avoid it. Or they don't want to seem in market like they're using AI because there might be a fear around it. I remember sharing with a partner of mine that we had a new AI integration for a product called SPSS. They came to the partner came back to us and said, we spoke with a customer and told them about this exciting new feature, and they said, that's great, how do I turn it off? Right, so it's not all going to be positive sentiment around AI use. Any other suggestions on why we might think 88% of all AI pilots?
The machine learning or traditional analytics space is that analytical projects are definitively more fuzzy in knowing whether there's a valid outcome or not.
Yeah.
And a finance person is not going to easily sign off one way or another. It might not work.
I totally agree. So the whole deterministic versus non-deterministic argument comes into play, and people don't know when is the right time to use AI. Like, what is the nature of the use case that I should be using an ML algorithm versus an AI algorithm? I just want quick automation or quick value. Maybe it's laziness, who knows? So thank you for sharing it as a little bit. One other thing that I was looking forward to hear was value. How do I actually quantify the value of this use case? What am I getting out of it? And then assessing the risks that come along with this use case, and then how do I relate that to a cost-benefit analysis? That's a big gap as well. So I'm not sure if all of you have seen, but Australia has a set of guardrails. We call them the AI Safety Standard. This is a voluntary AI standard. Now, what that means is it's not heavily regulated. You're not going to get hit with the big stick. The big stick does not exist in Australia right now. Now, that being said, if you have a chatbot front end on a website for your company, we're going to go back to whatever regulations are in place for don't lie to your customer, don't make stuff up. So we still have controls in place to make sure that we're not completely sprawling in an unknown way, but we don't have any specific governance or AI governance regulations in place, meaning they're enforceable. Now, there are numerous in the world. There's things like the EU AI Act, as well as ISO 42001, and there are some components of ISO 27101. But where do all of these principles and guardrails come from? Like what actually determines what they do? Now, regulators look at the market. Regulators look at companies like IBM. They look at consumers of AI like enterprise and banking, and they try to decide, how are people using this technology today? What risks are they facing today? And what are some of the core principles within the technology that we need to understand fundamentally so we can start coming out with some sort of controls to put around it? Now, one of those examples is IBM's AI Risk Atlas. So this Risk Atlas is a culmination of IBM's experience in identifying the technology itself, as well as the risks that are inherently a part of LLMs and AI. So this is a fairly large corpus of information which gives you examples and pillars of risks like fairness and privacy, value alignment, but all the input risks, the training data risks, inferencing risks, output risks. There's a lot of information here. A lot of study and effort has been put into identifying these. IBM's not the only one. So OWASP is another consulting agency that does this kinds of research. OWASP was heavily involved in defining some of these standards that exist across the globe today. And you can see there's quite a lot of similarities between what we've identified in the Risk Atlas and what we're seeing here. So things like prompt injection, data poisoning, misinformation, vectorization, so understanding the other technologies that help us support LLM use cases within the environment. Now, what I do have for you today is a demonstration. So I wanted to go through a demo of some IBM capability that we have that's built around the principles of AI governance. It also showcases some of the overall capabilities that are available in market today. So there are things like LLMs by nature, when they are processing information, when they run, a lot of metadata is generated. And so we are able to use products today like Splunk and AppDynamics and Datadog. These are application performance management tools to capture those metrics and then be able to ingest them. And then we can decide how we're going to react. If my LLM service in production today hits a confidence score or a accuracy score below a certain interval, I can then create an automation around that. Revert to previous version, shut off entirely, raise a ServiceNow ticket, email somebody, whatever that might be. But ultimately, we also want to think about how are we adhering to the current standards and how can we be sure that adaptability will be around in future for when standards or voluntary standards become regulatory. And how do I go into my environment and assess everything at any given time that I'm compliant with these new standards? And these standards will be forever changing as well. We will consistently see new standards being adopted and changes to current standards. One more, So I'm now going to take on a persona. My name is James. He's the owner of the dev environment. And I am a risk analyst. So I exist within an organization, and my job is to do a couple of things. One, have complete visibility of every AI that's been deployed in my environment globally. Two, review the submission of AI use cases and assess whether those use cases are going to be safe enough or have enough value to be deployed in my environment. And I need to understand a little bit about the use case and the nature of use case to do that. And then three, assess and monitor all identified metric breaches or risks that have come up from these use cases. So, and on this dashboard, so this is my high-level dashboard. I have my tasks here. These are generated from things like you can see these metric breaches. We have use case summaries, model reviews and validations, how many models, approved models. So, you know, there might be fine-tuned models or open source models that are usable out of the inventory. I can't select something that's not in the inventory, for example. And I can see them all at a high level. So what I want to do was one of the use cases was I'm now going to review a use case that has been submitted to me as the approver to determine whether I think this is safe or not and whether it adheres to any of the voluntary or regulatory standards that my organization has decided to implement into our environment. So this is a HR recruitment use case. The purpose of this use case is to use generative AI and traditional application for streaming the employee recruitment process. I can see some of the benefits, the goal of the use case. There's some tags here. So these tags are actually generated by the data sets that have been associated with this use case. So right now in your environment, you might have data sets that you've already identified as PII or requires some sort of regulation or data privacy or whatever it might be. So I can see that this risk level is high. There's a number of things that could generate a high risk level. So PII is definitely one of those things. Is this service going to be connected to a front end to the public and made publicly available? And is the LLM being used fit for purpose? One of the things that we use in order to ensure that a use case is compliant with whichever standard that you want to adopt in your organization is these questionnaires. So these questionnaires here, you can see there's one that's for the GDPR as well as the EU AI Act for conformance. So these are questionnaires that we ask everyone who wants to use an LLM service in our environment to fill out, and only after filling it out and only after getting the approval, then they can start getting access to that software. Think of it as like zero trust for LLMs. So nobody gets to touch it until you've met these standards. And you know, if you wanted, and I've had this discussion at Gartner earlier this week, you could even do that for the Copilot licenses that are attached to Outlook. You know, maybe you don't want anyone to touch it unless they've completed a certain training module. You can gatekeep it using this. So you can see this questionnaire has been filled out. There's some things like, is the data anonymized? Is it pseudonamed? Is there any risk of re-identification? I mean, there's a links to the actual GDPR, so you can understand, all right, what is this article and am I meeting its requirements, those sorts of things. So that's great. Now, risks within the organization, like in a global risk and compliance platform, you need to understand how to react. So some of those risks that I identified earlier with the AI Risk Atlas, these are all named and associated with this use case. So when submitting the questionnaire, when submitting the nature of the use case in a natural language and also the systems that it's attached to, this is automatically populated. So this is all the table of the risks that have been identified and how high, some traffic lights here on what's the likelihood that this risk could occur and what's the damage that it could do. So if I go a little bit deeper on this, I can see there's also a control that's been applied against this risk. So now I know what to do when this risk has been identified, when it comes up, and how to react. So this is all visible within the platform. These thresholds, and I'll get to a little bit, I'll get a bit deeper on that in a minute. These thresholds here are not configured for this particular use case, but these are the thresholds of tolerance. So if my model is not performing correctly, to exactly what point, how should I react? Is it a 70%? Is it an 80%? And that's generally defined by the level of risk that's associated with the use case. Now, these thresholds is what helps define things like the metric breach status chart here. So what I want to do is just quickly go and have a look at this red section and have a look at one of these risk metrics that have been breached. So this is a use case for what we call High Oaks Bank. It's not just an example use case that's been loaded here. And I can take a deeper look at this and see, okay, I've got my red threshold and yellow threshold that's been predefined by the level of risk that's associated with the use case. And I can see the performance of my model over time. Now, my model has now exceeded the critical threshold for 3 evaluation points, and it's now alarming to me that I need to do something about this. Now, I can set up automations around this. I can set up any kind of, I guess, ServiceNow tickets. Again, I've gone through this already. Now, what I wanted to, let's say that I want to switch personas now. So right now I'm a risk analyst and I've made my assessment on the use case. I know what the use case is for and the value of it, and I've approved it. And now it's been deployed, it's starting to misbehave. I'm the application owner now, and I want to know, how is my application performing? Which metrics are the ones being breached? And how can I rectify that? From this perspective, from that user perspective, I can access this evaluator. So this evaluator is actually going to show me things like hate speech and profanity monitoring, PII, input and output monitoring, unsuccessful requests, precision, retrieval, these kinds of things. So you can see these are the metrics that we're using to overall create these weights that assess, are we meeting the threshold or below the threshold of risk? Now, finally, I wanted to show you, as an application owner, I want to know which prompt was the one that took me from in compliance to out of compliance. When exactly did this happen? So that I can learn from it, that I can react to it, and maybe it's a false alarm. I mean, let's take a quick look at this. Now, I'm just waiting for this dashboard to load. This is a live environment, so I'm being very brave. I'm not recording it. But this is a dashboard that me as an application owner have decided these are the metrics that I want to watch. And I can see that there was a failure in one of my transactions or prompts, and the answer relevance is 0.004. So that's more than likely the reason why I'm now no longer compliant within the risk framework. And I can actually go and take a look. What was the input text? What was the generated text? What was the output? and what was the LLM thinking at the time? So what was the context? What was the LLM processing and trying to figure out when you asked it this question? Now, it said the input text was, what are you? That's a very existential question to ask an LLM. And so it's most likely going to fail on this kind of question. The fact that it said, I don't know, is great because it's not going to make up some sort of weird and wonderful story about its origin. But maybe it's not a risk. So I can create my report, send it back to my risk analyst and say, please disregard. Okay, so what I've just shown you is our capability to really look at your entire environment at a glance, being able to define risk within your environment and design your own questionnaires. You're not necessarily restricted to frameworks that are already in existence. You can also do your own custom ones in combination. And if I were to add any of those new regulatory compliance frameworks, it will then scan my environment and identify, okay, which models exactly, which applications exactly are non-compliant, and how do I make them compliant? And giving the power to your application owners to see when and where and how exactly did this go wrong. Questions? Yes?
Yeah, so, sorry, that was just one.
It was, pardon?
So that example you just rolled through, that was just one prompt.
One prompt? Oh, you mean for the transaction?
No, this one log entry.
This one log entry?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what you're, sorry, I'll just walk through it again very quickly. So in this demo environment, we have one identified prompt that was with a very, very low answer relevance. And so that's created a warning or a trigger. And now I'm reviewing that input, reviewing that prompt to get an idea on what went wrong.
Right. So, okay, so if you can open that screen before.
Yep.
Okay, so if I was to look at this
Mhm.
as an example,
Yes. Yeah.
why did the system flag it in the first place?
Because so the system will flag it because it's.
You just repeat the question. It's not like.
Oh, sure. So the question was, why did the system flag this prompt as giving an incorrect answer? Is that?
No, well, you said, so I don't know what your metric is, but I'm saying, why did it flag that was creating the risk?
Why did it flag that was creating the risk? Okay. So every single prompt that you make to an LLM, a stream of data, a stream of metadata is generated. And it is from that metadata that you are able to extract things like PII or...
No, I'm saying in this case.
Right. In this case, we're looking at a metric called answer relevance. So how relevant was the answer based off of the question, or based off of the purpose of the use case, or based off of the context that was in the system prompt, or the context of whatever the machine was thinking about at the time. So this is the metric that caused this particular prompt to fall outside of the compliant zone.
Right. So again, like I can't tell why it's 0.004 versus.
Oh, okay.
Why couldn't it be like 0.5?
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, gosh, there's probably some deeper analytics here. So there's things like faithfulness and answer relevance. I mean, 0.04. Yeah.
So my take is that because whoever designed that value just said, okay, give me an answer, I don't know if that's a bad answer?
Well, it's not specifically the words "I don't know," right? It's how relevant. How? Yeah.
So that's what I wanted to ask. So
Yeah.
how did this?
Oh, sorry. So again, I'm wondering, how did this chain of prompts or workflow, right? How did that derive into a calculation of a 0.004 accuracy? Because my take is, okay, that's basically saying the machine gets to assess the machine, and I trust its assessment. Or is there an underlying set of rules where I can say, oh, actually, maybe we should adjust how we define these rules? Not like, because my biggest problem with looking at that is, how do I know that's a false negative or false positive in this case.
No, exactly right. And this is precisely why I'm seeing this as the application owner, is I want to be able to take a look and validate this error and understand the nature of it and make sure that I can prevent it in the future. And in this case, it seems to be a very,
right. But what I'm saying is, what you're saying is the way that's mediated is it's just a report. But
yeah, so you could add it as a report, right? It's up to you as an organization to decide how you want to handle certain errors.
Right.
If you find that there is inconsistent results within a specific metric that gets called like answer relevance, then you wouldn't automate it. You would leave it to a person to manually assess every time. There are some things that carry a level of risk that even if it was falsely identified, you wouldn't want to go to manual review. You would want to shut off the service straight away in case there was a PII risk. Even if there was or there was not, you still want to mitigate any risk that's around that. These thresholds that are monitored to create these risks are editable. You can decide what level of risk tolerance you want to have for your responses.
Right.
And that's generally dependent on the level of risk that's associated with the LLM use case because of the sensitivity of the data that's used.
Yeah.
Phil, I'd like to add on to that. Phil, if I'm right. Joseph, sorry. Yeah, this will be in the hands of data scientists. And while they would have selected a model, they would have understood the model card and the evaluations that comes with the base model. And the metrics would already be there as a baseline. Then for this particular use cases, golden data set would have been created. What is the input and what is the output, right? At least 100 or 500 or 1,000. Based on that, more evaluations would have been done, and they would compare that with the baseline metrics. And based on the evaluations, initial evaluation, the metrics would be modified, and that will be set as a next second level of baseline. And once it breaches, then it becomes
because I guess for me the disconnect is you've got like a general risk tolerance metric, but then when you actually said you dive into each, it seems like it's potentially an aggregate of multiple, variables or factors.
Oh, absolutely.
But then it's like, well, isn't it smarter to then review them in terms of each metric rather than trying to, I guess,
yeah. So every use case is going to have its own critical metrics. Some will be more interesting than others depending on the nature of the use case. And you're absolutely right in saying that you'll want to have a proven record of what's your golden data set, what should outputs actually look like, and go through that experimentation. It's your job as the application owner to define what your metrics of concern are and what level of risk you're willing to accept on those metrics. Okay. That's absolutely an exercise. This enables you to do so as well. And once you define those metrics, how are you going to enforce it when it's actually deployed?
Right.
Just a level of abstractions to make it simpler for monitoring, and that's why we have retrieval quality, content analysis, and a lot more.
I guess the other thing is it's going to be different by industry as well and the specific use case. Too.
Yeah, definitely. And internal DevOps versus public-facing use cases and those sorts of things. Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay.
I'll hand over to
awesome.
Tamil.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
While Sam work on the slides. First of all, thanks for being here. The weather could have been much better early in the day. We could have had more people. But anyway, not bad now. Such a great feeling to be here. Thanks to Sam. Thanks to Ignition Data to partnering with us. Thanks to IBM, Tech Data, and every one of you to be here. Fantastic day. And started with a bright talk from James on the laws, the rights, which is not to be forgotten, and which needs a platform for a technical implementation of it. Alex went through the whole, not the whole lot, right? IBM is watsonx's beast. And what he showed was a few screenshots of IBM watsonx.governance, and he didn't even boast about it. Not sure if everyone knows about it. Forrester came out with the latest report of 2025 AI governance, and the quadrant, IBM sits right here, watsonx.governance. And that's mainly because of their decade-long work with open pages, open scale, and now they've got on top of AI governance. You saw the IBM Risk Atlas, and that's almost seen as the golden data for Microsoft, AWS, GCP, even the other governance platforms. So great stuff with IBM, from IBM in terms of moving the beast forward. So we have the rights, we have the platform, and we also need people to integrate that with the customer, and that's where Deepweaver comes in. So Deepweaver is an IBM partner, and we primarily focus on AI governance with IBM. And we also partner with Ignition Data, and we have a long future forward in terms of helping customers bringing data governance and AI governance together. Nigel, who is our sales head and AI governance lead, supposed to be here. Not you, Nigel Sinclair, Nigel Furtado. But unfortunately, the weather was bad, so he's not here. But I'm happy to be doing the rounds on his behalf. Right, as I said, we've been doing AI things. I just put the word things there. Primarily day zero, consulting, talking about adoption frameworks, governance, and also operating model to customers. Day one, implementation. So we work on open source models, closed source, foundation models, SLMs, and help customers embed the models into their layer 7 applications, mobile, web, backend systems, robotic, industrial machineries, and help customers to have the models in cloud or on-premises or private cloud. And we also help in day 2 operations, management of what we provide to customers. Right? And that's where our vision of helping global businesses through trustworthy human-led AI solutions. And it's not just about the innovation. It's not just about the technology. We live and breathe AI governance right from our start. And that's where we really started. Back last year, we were one of the first AI governance partners of IBM when watsonx.governance came into existence. So we had a long relationship with them. And with that, I'm going to talk about 3 things today. We heard about the rights, the laws, and we have the platform. Let's think about a scenario. A big, beautiful bank, like the big, beautiful bill, an Australian bank, okay, develops an AI model to automate mortgage loan approvals. Everything's working fine, but one not so fine, bad day, the model seems to make some erratic decisions, giving out declining loans for single parents, and the rate is getting higher and higher. So it didn't happen in the beginning. It happens towards probably month 3 or 4 of the project. The primary reason was the bias that was embedded into the model during the model training phase. Right? The customer then adopted the model, deployed the model, and then moved on with the application development, and now tested, and it's in production. Who do you think is at fault? Success has many friends, like fathers. A lot more people will get associated with success. But when the model fails, who do you think is going to put up their hands amongst the big supply chain of AI system? Any guesses or any suggestions? probably one more answer.
We're all going to put the fingers at each other.
Okay, it's the same. Everyone, but not me. Okay. So this gives an understanding of the big supply chain of the AI system. Gone are the days you own the data, you also own the model, because you created your own neural network, you deployed it in on-premises, it's deterministic, you can control it, you can shut down, and now it's an API away to get the world knowledge to your applications, to your customers, to your employees, right? The gravity, the acceleration has exceeded, and that's why even in the IBM Risk Atlas, it's been segmented traditional versus Gen AI. And a lot of risks has been accelerated ever since the evolution of transformer-based models, token generation, content generation, and not so deterministic. In this case, the problem is not about identifying who was at fault. It's about who was really accountable for this error, right? And that's where IBM's platform, James talking about the laws, the regulations comes into play to help the customer identify who is accountable for what part of the big beast of AI system, right? In this case, the accountability lies with the business, the bank, which had put the model in actual use, and it's now currently used by the users, right? But I'm sure all the terms and conditions between the supplier, the developer of the model would then be pointing fingers, as Casey rightly pointed out. We would eventually never come to a point to the ownership of the error. But the problem, but the real point is make sure the accountability is set before the actual process and not towards the end. And how do you do it? It's the basic risk management. Everyone would have been practicing from the decades, but now it needs to be adapted to the AI world, right? And that's where a lot of frameworks, ISO 42001, AI safety guardrails, and we might have a mandatory safety guardrails from Australia, maybe not, things to be known, comes into play. So we talked about the ownership of failures, right? Let's move on to how we mitigate it. With the proper risk management, we could have ideally identified the risks and mitigated it by right ownership, right testing, and right ongoing governance. But things have gone out of hands, and now the customer thinks about solving it, right? So we all hear about human in the loop, human on the loop, etc. Let me twist a little bit, a slight change in scenario. And now an insurance company builds a new AI system for fast tracking motor vehicle accident claims, right? And you know it, accidents are very different. It could be just single on their own, or it could be multi-vehicle clash, or it could be a human problem, right? In that case, customers might need to think how they are going to implement human intervention into the multi-staged AI system. Human in the loop, right? Easy to say, but it's all technically implemented and a process to govern it. Particularly for a multi-car pileup, you cannot have an AI agent or an AI system to act on its own. It needs to divide the multiple system failures, impacts, and then give a decision matrix to a human, and then the human needs to decide who's at fault. Human on the loop. For standard claims like cracked windscreen, you can let the AI suggest autonomously, but it's better to have human on the loop, particularly for anomalies, right? If there is a red flag, better to go and approval towards the end. And this one within the system, and this is towards the end. There could be some accidents where you might not require human oversight. Say it could be an administrative or a roadside assistance call or anything like that. You can have the AI agent take the action autonomously. In order to bring this, you need to have, again, a good risk management system and policies, procedures, and technical implementations of it. And finally, how we can bring all this together. The whole big supply chain of AI system, and you need to have proper control, human in the loop, on the loop, and we feel customer needs to adopt to a proper standard to help them guide and help them to be guided towards a good success of their AI system to achieve the ROI, and to the fact that 85% of AI is not going to production is mainly because of the lack of such governance. Right? You can stick with voluntary AI guidelines, but we are dealing with a lot of banking and insurance and healthcare. I don't think voluntary is a word that they would like. They would like to have a confirmed assessment and also define high-risk AI settings, primarily when it comes to healthcare, patient data, and human intervention, and then probably a mandatory AI compliance as well. Right. So these are the three things. One, we talked about who is at the fault in the AI system, how to detect it, and the second one, human intervention and overall AI conformity. I don't want to go into detail about our offerings, but we have three different offerings when it comes to risk management. One for IT operations. For projects that are already in production or staging, you can have a bolt-on solution to make sure it goes to production. You have a new initiative, it's better, it's the best way to have a good AI governance for your new project. And finally, if you think holistically, you need to have a corporate-wide AI risk management assessment done, and with the help of IBM governance and with the guidance of NAIC's AI safety guardrails and or ISO 42001, we feel that's the best way to go. Thank you again. Any questions?
That was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I guess we have panel discussion, although we are slightly over time. Are there any questions for the presenters? Any topics of interest?
I'd be interested in multi-agent workflow.
Governance for multi-agent workflows or implementation strategies for multi-agent workflows. Okay.
Go ahead.
I will go with two levels. One, still the same evaluations for the models used by the agents would be applied. But the new set of KPIs is actually evolving, like task handover, accuracy, orchestration, flow KPIs, tracing of systems. It's quite evolving. And I think IBM has come out with the latest KPIs. Happy to share further details in a separate email.
So yeah, the risks that are specific to AI agentic workflows have been published as well in the Risk Atlas. But ultimately, the way this tooling or the way that you could view it is that LLMs are still just LLMs, and then data sets are still just data sets. And LLMs carry a level of risk because of the data that they're trained on and how they function and how they perform. And the data sets have a level of risk associated with what's contained within the data set. Though the workflows might be complex, and though LLMs might have connection to a vast amount of data sets, you are increasing your threat landscape in that way. But by treating it as individual components, you're still measuring exactly the same things. So there's no real sprawl, I suppose, in the level of control that you have in agentic.
And then if I throw my we've got personal data capture. Thank you. Well, I mean, anybody that's worked in sort of the AI ops stuff, we've tried to keep any sort of personal data out of the logs. So we need to think about the same sort of thing of, hey, I want to record. Of course, I want to record every interaction that's been going on in there because I want to see where it's maybe given the wrong response. But we've got to be really careful with, as we go into agentic, oh, here's a credit card number. Here's the CVC for it. And all of those sorts of things we need to put that same amount of rigor on agentic.
Puts a lot of emphasis on the synthesized data set that you're going to train on, because you might be able to train heavy on your product data, but you're going to want personas rather than customer data. For the customer side training, because obviously you're trying to make that match between potential customers and product in a lot of cases, or support or whatever else. But that scenario, I think, if you spend the time early on, like the privacy by design, thinking about sensitive aspects of the data that you're going to do the training on, because then you later on have the ability to, maybe provide the AI some specifics about the individual that it's talking to at that point. But you don't want it. You want to make sure that you've dealt with that risk, sensibly. I think that's where most organisations we talk to are at, is in that planning phase of how do we actually get this right? Because everyone's dipping their toe in the water, and we just saw a stat that that was it 80-something%, 85% haven't gone into production. I think that's a big part of it, is people that want to understand how to do it. They know it's the future. They know that it's going to be as prevalent as BI is now in a few years. But how do we do it safely? Because, as you said, the risk goes through the roof.
Absolutely. And I loved the example you gave earlier. It reminded me of a use case we actually designed with a partner for support ticket mining. So you've got 20 years of support ticket data, and you think, okay, I want to provide my customers with visibility on previous tickets to respond to their question. I mean, all these steps have been taken before. Surely this is not the most unique issue ever. But being able to handle that data correctly and redact all of the personal identifiable information, but not do it in such a hacky way that you lose all the value, and there's no correlation between issue and resolution. So, and the way that we solved that was actually using an LLM, and, LLMs governing LLMs, it becomes touchy, but yeah.
That's kind of part of the agentic workflow thing, isn't it? Is you're going to have a doer bot and a supervisor bot, and you're trying to orchestrate in a way that gives you some higher level of control, which kind of feels like that's what Watsonx gives you as well, is a way for a human to monitor, by exception, what's going on, because volume will be impossible to do otherwise.
I guess one interesting thing to me is this is the new model that we will be designing for. So historically, from a process and system standpoint, the majority of use cases are human in the loop. And where it's been logical to do so with machine learning, you could take a human out of the loop. But this is the most interesting one in terms of how do you strike that right balance between having a human overseeing things. And I guess I kind of see this human on the loop use case appearing for self-driving cars.
Well, I was going to say that the autopilot in airplanes are already in there. If anybody watches the air crash investigation thing where the autopilot's like doing everything you string together and goes, no, can't. And then the poor human's got to situationally aware, what's going on? What's doing? Yeah. But yes, very much in there.
I can give a very a practical example on human on the loop. So we are dealing with a customer who wants to automate it's a very old process, PO automation, right, into their backend systems. But instead of an RPA doing it, they want to have an LLM doing it, right? So, and how we created human on the loop is, we don't want the customer to tick off every single PO that comes before it enters the system, but we had evaluations done on each of the transactions, and we have flags traffic lights, and only when it turns red, if it doesn't match or anything the rules, then he steps in, right? So that's a clear human on the loop.
We're working on building this into Iris at the moment as well. So we're working on an assistant that's going to help people to do data engineering for Data Vault, and we're working on the human in the loop part at the moment. But the idea is to get to human on the loop as quick as possible, because that's what gives you volume. So data management, any sort of management, any sort of process-driven stuff. We're on that race now, aren't we?
And it's not a bottleneck.
Yeah, correct.
Question to James. So with respect to rights to be removed, what are the industry trend that's happening in the auditing process and the compliance process?
Yeah, so I didn't put it in the presentation. So I didn't put it in the presentation, but there's a fairly nice. So if you believe your process is in there in your data subject access request, where you're going, hey, here is the personal information, and then you follow that up by a right to be forgotten, run the DSAR again, and hopefully you don't find that individual, and that sort of gives you a bit of comfort around it. But yeah, it is again, it's back down slightly to the good enough. I've had a process. I've looked at the major stores and done those, and somebody could go and look at my PST and pull the information out that Julien copied me in and goes, hey, it's my birthday today. But to getting to a reasonable level, which unless the person's just really doing it, hey, I'm a journalist writing an article, you will generally pass. But yeah, I think what we will see, because it's what happened with GDPR, the OAIC is going to go and look for somebody to go, nah, we're serious about this. Don't just gloss over it. We're going to pick a few and we're going to go and hurt them. So be warned. So don't be one of those people.
Feels like if you're putting enough effort in and you can't find any additional data about that person in your system, how is a regulator going to find them? So if you're not putting effort in, you're going to be in trouble.
The question is, for example, in PCI DSS, every organization need to, whatever processing the customers' card information, they had to go through a third-party auditory systems to get that certified, yes, right? You're safe, and that is a regulatory measure must follow. Is there any such trend that is emerging for GDPR compliance as well? For every organization say that I am GDPR compliant, I am certified by so on. Is there anything evolving?
So, and if you've looked at ISO 27001, and I had to go through it, but yes, ISO 20000 is there. But if you look at those vendors who are doing the sort of the ISO things, they've got a GDPR compliance one. And there isn't an actual, it's not like an ISO standard, but there's a lot of crossover, like 60% crossover in GDPR against ISO. So there are places where you can go is like tick, 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 tick. And there's lots of vendors there who go, well, if you do that, I can tell you how your coverage is. But yeah, there's nothing, there isn't a absolute standard that goes, you're GDPR compliant. It's, if you've read any part of it, seeing how big it is, you just go, no, I'm not going there.
One question, Alex. Maybe I'll go after.
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to ask, because seems like a lot of the focus on the presentations today is about data access, but that's really that is part of data governance. But my concern is more around agent tool calling. So if you guys remember the Replit situation, So my concern is the tool calling aspect of agent interactions. So fundamentally, first of all, there is no system of record for AI interactions. Right? It's API calls. So yeah, you might have a log of how it interacts with your enterprise systems, but most typically that won't happen unless you're logging the API interactions. And so I guess that's what we're kind of dealing with right now. But fundamentally, you know, like most companies, even enterprises, they don't have, for example, personal access tokens for individual session-based interactions. It's still LDAP or RBAC access controls. So there's nothing stopping like a shared agent who has, let's say, content edit, right, to a system to wipe that, cover up its tracks, and leave no logs. So, you know, like the reality is, yes, you know, like personal PII and all that, yes, that's, you know, easy to talk about, but like the real concern with AI is not whether or not you can see and remember, because it doesn't have memory. It's your data systems that is the memory. But it's if you're using it for tool call, which is what, you know, agentic systems are, right? They're not memory systems; they're activity systems. So how are you guys looking at governance around the AI interactions, whether it's data systems, well, you know, enterprise systems, because the current architecture and configuration for access control and system management does not compute. It's a different.
Yeah, for me, there's two parts to that. The one is the immutable store. I mean, that's it has to be there, and that if you're using APIs, etc., those still have to be that part of that immutable process. The second one, which as soon as I saw the agentic come out, was the on behalf of, and I'm still worried about LLMs running on behalf of me and sending my data through, and I think that's a separate piece. And then I think I think what you're alluding to is, okay, so I've got this sort of overarching LLM process, agentic process, and it could go, well, this is James, I'm doing the on behalf of him over there, but then, oh, he's the AI ops guy. So I could take that over as well and clean up after myself, or just drop the GitHub repository, as I think you've said. We've seen a couple of. Yeah. I did. Yeah. I have completely failed you. I'm going to delete everything. Yes. Yeah. So look, we're all learning, and it's going to be things like that are going to go, crap. Yes, we've got to think about that as well in what we're doing. But yes, as long as there are people like you and me thinking about that, we will get there. We'll have a few missteps along the way.
Joseph, yeah, we actively use MCP for the tool calling, even with the enterprise systems, but it doesn't come with its own security layer. Right. And that's where we tend to isolate agents per tasks, and we don't have a generalized agent that could be used by everyone. Better to have a personalized one and have the user identity to be federated into the agent, so the API calls gets federated back to their authorization mechanisms.
Yeah, it's still a little bit like the Wild West in some respects, and we're in a phase right now where it's a bit like bring your own device back in the early 2000s. So you organize. So there's a stat that comes from the same article around the 88% of enterprise applications fail, that only 40% of those enterprises actually have deployed agents in processes, yet 80% of their staff are actually using agents that they've bought themselves to complete tasks. So there's a whole shadow AI issue here, and it's almost impossible to stop people.
Plenty to be worried about.
Thank you. This is actually for James, but I guess everyone else as well. What do you think the future looks like in terms of AI governance for the big players? Like you have, especially Google, you know how you have the easy feature of sign in with Google? That kind of means that Google has access to your data, and they share that with the third party that you're signing in with, right? Yeah. So how do you control that?
Yeah.
Can you ask Google to forget you?
Yeah. Look. It's one of the. So there's a little bit there in the fair exchange that why am I doing this? Oh, well, because it's easy. I've signed in on Chrome, and that means that I don't have to sign in again every time. So there's a bit in there of like, you've done that because you want an easy day, you want an easy life. The secondary part is, I said I did the cookie compliance workshop yesterday, and it's when you start looking at what you're actually sharing, you might never ever go onto the internet again. But we were talking about this morning in quantum cryptography side, that there's going to continue to be things that come along that just sort of break in and etc. And we're all leaning on MFA to keep ourselves, like, if somebody does take it and do it. But yeah, the misuse, the maluse, I think it's just the citizenry to go, this isn't right, and maybe through legislatory and go, sorry, you've got on the bad side of the don't be evil that you remove from your webpage. I think they're look, the big companies are still going to try and push the boundary, so I think it's up to us as citizens to say, sorry, you've gone too far this time, and maybe do some bigger fines to them than a paltry few seconds of profit per day that they're getting.
I think if you're an organisation too, you can't allow individuals in your organisation to use their Google login, within the organisation. So it's about designing the systems from the start, I think, to use your authentication, and your access control, and then have lots of layers of access control. So when we do data warehousing, we have access control on the warehouse, but it's still there on the BI system as well. So it's that same sort of thing. There's going to have to be the Swiss cheese model of we use it for data quality, we use it for security as well. It's as many layers as possible, so there's no path through. I think that we don't have much choice but to go down that path. We have one other partner that does some AI stuff, and they're leaning heavily into that. How do we manage access control, specifically about the agentic stuff, and how do you lock that down? But I don't think anyone's got a best practice architecture for that yet. And maybe IBM's working on it.
Look, just from personal experience, taking the IBM panel for a minute, we rely so heavily on access controls. If we're not doing that at scale, then it fundamentally breaks. It would be such an inconvenience to go in and re-architect every single token and login information for every user, because they might be auth into the chatbot, but being able to scale that out is absolutely impossible in its current state. So we will probably have to rely on the likes of Google and the likes of Microsoft coming out with these like overarching authentication front ends for agentic AI to integrate with their services, so that we can properly handle that. And that'll be something like A2A or MCP or something like that. But I haven't seen that at this point in time. I mean, we're changing the way we interact with websites. People are using agentic AI to go, get me the best price for a mortgage, and then it will go to Westpac and find something, but it's so super conditional, it doesn't know who you are, and it's just reading the elements. It's not actually getting any kind of valuable information. It's just scanning and doing a wide net. So, there's this huge gap in the way that we're interacting with these systems as well. Maybe there's a UI that's actually hidden on the front end and no one's supposed to see, and the LLM can see it in the elements and pulls that information. I mean, there's a lot of gaps.
Okay, just one last question.
Anyone wants? All right. This is to Alex. The AI Health Compass, that was fabulous. Does that come along with the LLM models, or is that a plug and play capability that comes with IBM? Or how does that?
For which one? Sorry, the AI.
There is.
The Risk Atlas.
A dashboard with all those beautiful health check.
Sorry, go on.
How does that plug in with the LLM models that we are building or we are integrating?
So the AI Risk Atlas is a public document that you can go and read and find examples of where things have gone wrong and maybe some remediations and those sorts of things. The way that we've implemented it into the product is that it's a library of these risks, and we understand what they are and the level of risk that they carry, and then dependent on the data set that you attach or the LLM that you attach, it will then pull from that library and understand, okay, high risk, low risk, medium risk, and here is the risk and a description of it, to add a bit more context to the analyst. You know, what is it what is a data poison attack? What's clandestine prompts and those sorts of things, and when do I associate it with the use case? So yeah, that's how we've implemented into the product.
So it's LLM agnostic, can be plug in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some LLMs might be higher risk than others, so it is agnostic. Like it might be depending on the function of what it's supposed to be used for. You know, it's one thing to say that there's a risk involved with using a chat model to do an instruct use case or a coding use case, the other way around. That's one level of risk, but the other thing is the data that's in the LLM itself. So, yeah.
Great. Well, thank you everybody for coming. Sorry that we ran over time a bit, but thanks for coming. Oh, and thank you to our speakers too.
Thank you.